Welcome to This Explainer. If you are into structured, deep dive learning, you are absolutely in the right place today. We're going to unpack a genuinely profound piece of classical Sanskrit literature, the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Specifically, we're looking at Canto 4, Chapter 31, which is titled The Conclusion of the Pracetas. And our goal today? We are doing a complete, rigorous, verse-by-verse breakdown of this ancient text. We are going to cover every single verse of this chapter, missing absolutely nothing. So, let's just dive right in.
Here's our roadmap. We'll start off with Narada meeting the Pracetas, explore actions without the Supreme, look at watering the cosmic root, how to please Hari, the liberation of the Pracetas, and wrap up with Vidora's departure and the final blessings. 6 sections, 31 verses. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Narada meets the Pracetas, which covers verses 1 through 7. So let's set the scene. After a long period of austerities, the Pracetas engage in family life. They marry, but eventually they decide to leave home, entrusting their wife to the care of their son. They travel west, eventually arriving at a sacred seaside, actually the exact same spot where the sage Jajali previously achieved perfection. Here, they sit down to perfect their own yoga practice, completely controlling their breath and mind. And then we get the inciting incident. Out of nowhere, the great sage Narada Muni arrives. Naturally, the Pracetas immediately stand up and offer him deep, deep respect and worship. And this leads us right into verses 5, 6, and 7. The Pracetas make this stunning and honestly pretty relatable admission to Narada. They essentially tell him, look, we got so caught up in family life that we completely forgot the spiritual knowledge we learned. It's a very human moment. They present him with this desperate, beautiful plea, asking him to illuminate the spiritual knowledge that will help them easily cross over the insurmountable ocean of material existence. It's a huge, profound question, and it sets the stage for a profound answer. Moving right along to Section 2, Actions Without the Supreme. This takes us through verses 8 to 12. Now, Narada methodically breaks down what we typically consider major human achievements. Think about highly prized assets, a noble birth, a lifespan as long as the demigods, flawless execution of Vedic rituals, immense physical strength, strict yoga practice, or just a razor-sharp intellect. But Narada throws a curveball here. He argues that without devotion to Hari, the Supreme Lord, every single one of these assets is ultimately useless. They just cannot grant true spiritual liberation on their own. He establishes a really definitive baseline here. True spiritual efficacy is only found when our actions, our lifespan, our mind, and our speech are actively utilized in the service of the Supreme. Without that foundational connection, the text argues, we're literally just spinning our wheels in the material world. Which brings us to Section 3, Watering the Cosmic Root, covering verses 13 through 17. In verse 14, Narada uses this brilliant, simple law of nature. Think about it. If you want to nourish a tree, you don't go around with a dropper individually watering every leaf and twig. No, you water the root and the whole tree thrives. Similarly, you don't individually feed your eyes and your ears. You put food in your stomach, and that energy distributes to all the senses. Narada maps this analogy directly to spiritual philosophy. The Supreme Lord Asuta is the root of all existence. By directing your worship and service to that central root, you automatically satisfy all other living entities and aspects of the cosmos. He builds on this logic in the next few verses. Just as water is drawn up by the sun's heat and later returns as rain, or how creatures emerge from the earth and eventually return their bodies right back to it, all material energies flow from and ultimately return to the Supreme Brahman. The text is using these undeniable, everyday natural cycles to prove that absolutely everything is inherently connected to and completely dependent on the Supreme. Let's transition into Section 4, How to Please Hari, which takes us through verses 18 to 22. Verse 19 actually gives us a literal formula for spiritual success. How do you quickly please the Lord? Well, according to the text, it takes 3 things. First, showing unconditional mercy to all living beings, which makes sense, right? It goes back to recognizing that shared cosmic root we just talked about. Second, maintaining deep contentment with whatever comes your way naturally without over-endeavoring or stressing out. And third, achieving complete pacification and control of all your senses. Verses 20 and 21 expand on this with a pretty stark contrast.
The text states that the Supreme Lord completely ignores those who are arrogant about their wealth, their aristocratic birth, or their education, especially if they use those things to mock pure-hearted people. On the flip side, the Lord never leaves the hearts of the desireless, humble devotees. Basically, humility, not material achievement, is the ultimate currency here. This all culminates in verse 22 with the rhetorical question that Narada poses in absolute awe. He points out a beautiful divine paradox. The Lord is entirely self-satisfied and complete in himself, yet he makes himself completely dependent on the love of his devotees. Narada is essentially asking, when you realize this dynamic, how could any grateful person ever abandon such a Lord? On to Section 5, Liberation of the Pracetas, verses 23 through 27. So what's the immediate aftermath of all this? Well, having delivered these holy narrations, Narada Muni departs for Brahmaloka. Left alone, the Pracetas immediately put his words into practice. They meditate deeply on the teachings and the Supreme Lord, and because of this, their ultimate destination is secured. They attain the supreme abode. They finally cross over that insurmountable ocean they were so worried about back in verse 7. To wrap up the scene, Sukadeva Goswami, who is the overarching narrator of the entire text, formally concludes this storyline regarding the lineage of King Uttanapada and briefly mentions the next king, Priyavrata. Finally, our last section. Vidura departs, final blessings, taking us through verses 28 to 31. Remember, this entire story has been told by the sage Maitreya to Vidura. In verses 28 and 29, we get a profoundly human moment. Vidura, upon hearing this amazing conclusion, is completely overwhelmed with emotion. He literally sheds tears of love, places Maitreya's feet on his head as a sign of the utmost respect, and deeply thanks the yogi for guiding him out of the darkness of material ignorance. And verse 30 closes out Vidura's whole character arc for this canto. Having received this ultimate transcendental knowledge, his heart is completely peaceful. All his anxieties are just gone, and he departs for the city of Hastinapura to reunite with his relatives, carrying this totally new spiritual vision with him. Then we hit verse 31, which offers the Falashruti. This is the traditional classical Sanskrit conclusion that lists the specific blessings you get simply by hearing or reading this narration. The text promises that whoever listens to this exchange between Narada and the Pracetas will attain a long life, acquire wealth, grow a reputation of good fame, experience general auspiciousness in their endeavors, and ultimately reach the supreme destination. It's an incredibly comprehensive package of both material and spiritual blessings promised to the dedicated listener. And just like that, our verse-by-verse journey comes to a close. We've seen exactly how the Pracetas moved from confusion all the way to ultimate liberation by understanding the central importance of the cosmic root. We promised you every verse, and we covered every verse. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Having mapped out this profound journey step by step, how will you water the root of your own cosmic tree today? How can you take these ancient, powerful analogies and apply them to your modern life right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep learning, and I will see you in the next one.
Imagine spending your entire life building an empire. You climb the ladder, you amass wealth, power, a massive family, and you finally reach the absolute peak of success.
Right, the dream we're all supposed to want.
Exactly. And then, one random Tuesday, you just stop. You hand the keys to the kingdom over to your kids, you walk out the front door, and you head into the wilderness to meditate.
I mean, it is the ultimate pivot. It completely defies all of our conventional logic about what we are actually supposed to be striving for in life.
And that radical pivot is exactly where we are starting today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are looking at a custom stack of notes and translations you shared with us regarding a massive ancient text called the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam.
Yes, and specifically, our mission today is to unpack the 31st and final chapter of its 4th canto.
Right. We are going to follow the final journey of a group of kings known as the Pracetas. But, we aren't just recounting ancient history here.
No, not at all. We are extracting the core philosophy from their journey to figure out the ultimate recipe for where we should be directing our own energy.
Because this isn't just a story about ancient royals walking away from it all.
Right, it is a masterclass in focus. And the scene the text sets right at the beginning in verse 1 is incredibly striking. The Pracetas, these wildly powerful kings, suddenly recall the teachings of the Supreme Lord.
And the text refers to the divine here as Adhokshaja, right?
Spot on.
Yeah.
which translates to the one who is beyond the perception of the material senses. The very moment that memory hits them, the illusion of their royal material life just shatters.
They literally leave their wives in the care of their sons and just walk away from the palace.
Yeah, verse 2 tells us they head west, finding a seashore where a sage named Jajali had previously achieved perfection.
And they don't just sit on the beach casually taking in the view either. They engage in this intense sacrifice called a Brahma Satra. Now, from what I understand, this isn't a ritual with fire and offerings. It's an internal sacrifice where they are identifying themselves with all living beings.
Exactly. It's an unimaginably high level of physical and mental discipline. By verse 3, the text explicitly notes that they mastered their breath, their minds, their speech, and even their vision.
Oh, wow. So total lockdown.
Completely. They are sitting perfectly still, entirely merged in the Supreme. To do that, to completely insulate yourself from the external world and see your own soul as fundamentally connected to the life force in every other being.
It requires a total shutdown of the ego.
Precisely. But into this perfect, isolated stillness walks someone who totally changes the trajectory of their meditation.
Narada arrives.
Yes, the legendary Narada.
Now let's unpack who this is for you listening, because Narada isn't just some guy wandering the beach. He is the ultimate cosmic VIP.
He really is. He's a wandering sage,
Love
worshipped
chat.
by both demigods and demons alike.
It would be like our retired executives sitting in their remote off-the-grid cabin, and the most famous, elusive spiritual teacher in the universe just happens to knock on the front door.
And their reaction to his arrival in verse 4 is immediate. Despite being in this deep, breath-controlled trance, the Pracetas instantly stand up.
They don't just ignore him to keep meditating.
No, they bow down, they welcome him, and they offer him a comfortable seat, which tells us something crucial.
What's that?
True spiritual advancement doesn't make you arrogant or detached from basic respect. It actually heightens your awareness of when true grace arrives.
That makes a lot of sense. And they are so incredibly relieved to see him. In verse 5, they offer this beautiful greeting, comparing Narada's wandering to the sun, saying his mere presence dispels their fear.
But then in verse 6, they make this confession that is just so wrong.
I found it completely stunning. They admit that despite having been directly instructed by Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu in the past,
Like literally getting life advice directly from the divine.
yeah, they forgot almost everything.
It is one of the most honest moments in the entire text.
It really changes how you view these supposedly perfect ancient figures. These are great kings who had undeniable visions of the universe's ultimate power. And even they admit they got distracted by everyday household chores.
Family drama, the stress of running an economy.
It's so relatable. It makes you realize how easily the daily grind erases our bigger perspectives.
Totally.
I mean, if a group of highly advanced kings can forget the meaning of life because they had too many administrative meetings, what hope do we have?
Well, that realization is exactly why they are so desperate for Narada's help in verse 7. This text frequently refers to material existence as an ocean.
And the Pracetas beg Narada to illuminate spiritual knowledge for them so they can easily cross this ocean.
Right. They realize that their own efforts, even their intense, disciplined meditation on the beach, just aren't enough. They are stuck.
You need a guide who has already crossed to the other side. And you would think a spiritual master like Narada would be gentle with them. Like, hey, it happens to the best of us. Ruling a kingdom is hard.
You would think so, yeah.
But no. Verse 8 shifts to the sage narrating this history, a man named Maitreya, who tells us that Narada, completely absorbed in the Supreme Lord, begins to speak.
And he does not pull his punches. Narada delivers a sweeping, uncompromising truth.
He really does.
In verse 9, he lays out his core thesis right away. He says a human birth, one's lifespan, your karma, your mind, and your speech are only successful if they are used to serve Hari.
The Supreme Lord and the soul of the universe.
All right. And then in verses 10 through 12, he literally lists everything we consider to be the pinnacle of human achievement and says it's totally useless if the Supreme Lord isn't pleased.
The list he gives reads like a spiritual wrecking ball. He says all three types of birth are pointless.
Meaning your physical birth, your spiritual initiation, and your qualification to perform sacred rituals.
He says even if you manage to achieve a lifespan as long as a demigod, it's a waste.
He goes directly after the mind and the body, too. The things we assume give us intrinsic value.
Exactly. He lists austerities, sharp intelligence, mental power, perfectly studying the Vedas.
Physical strength.
Right. He says it's all pointless without Harya. But hold on, I have to stop you there.
Sure, go ahead.
Because, look, I try to hit the gym, I read nonfiction to stay sharp. We all spend decades trying to cultivate a sharp mind and physical discipline. Are you telling me Narada thinks all of that self-improvement is just a complete waste of time?
I know it sounds incredibly harsh and dismissive of human achievement.
Very dismissive.
But it definitely makes sense once you understand the underlying mechanism he is describing. It's not that intelligence or yoga or intense self-discipline are inherently bad things.
Okay, then what are they?
It's that they are just tools. Let's think of it this way. A highly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar drill is an incredible piece of engineering, right? The titanium bit is your physical strength. The motor is your sharp intelligence. But if it's not plugged into a power source, or if you're just drilling holes into empty air...
It's a completely useless achievement.
Exactly. Narada is saying that tools disconnected from their ultimate purpose, which is the supreme soul, are empty.
So it's an issue of alignment. We spend decades sharpening the drill bit, but we forget to plug the cord into the wall.
Spot on. That's why Narada specifically calls out things like mastering yoga, studying Sankhya philosophy, and even taking sannyasa, the renounced order of life.
Let's define those for the listener, because those are heavy terms. Sankhya philosophy is basically the ancient science of deeply analyzing and categorizing every single element of the material world.
Yeah, like spreadsheeting the entire universe.
And sannyasa is giving up all material possessions and social ties.
Precisely. You can be the greatest philosopher, perfectly categorizing the universe, or a perfect renunciant who owns nothing. But if those extreme efforts aren't connected to serving the Supreme, they don't actually get you across that ocean of material existence. They just make you a very well-equipped, highly philosophical person who is still drowning in the ocean.
Wow, that puts it into a totally different light. So how do we plug the drill into the wall?
Well, Narada sees them struggling to understand this. So in verses 13 and 14, he gives them this brilliant blueprint using one of the most famous analogies in the entire text.
Oh, the root and the branches.
Yes. First, he establishes that Hori is the dearest soul of all beings, the ultimate reality. And then he explains the mechanics of ultimate efficiency.
How does that work?
He tells them that if you water the root of a tree, you automatically nourish the trunk, the branches, and all the leaves.
It all just flows up.
Exactly. Similarly, if you supply food to the stomach, the life air, you nourish all the senses. You don't feed your eyes and ears separately.
Obviously not. That would be crazy.
In that exact same way, worshiping the Supreme automatically satisfies everyone and everything.
This is such a powerful visual. Imagine trying to water a giant oak tree by individually painting every single leaf with a wet Q-tip.
You would literally work yourself to death.
And the tree would still die of thirst. But that is exactly what we do in our lives. We try to please every individual aspect of our existence.
Our boss, our family, our social circle.
Our physical desires, we're just painting the leaves one by one. We exhaust ourselves trying to micromanage the branches when all we have to do is pour a bucket of water on the roots and the whole tree thrives.
And that is the exact trap the Pracetas fell into when they were ruling their kingdom. They were painting the leaves.
So what does Narada tell them next?
In verse 15, what Narada does is scale this analogy up to a cosmic level to show just how interconnected everything is.
Like the cycle of nature.
Right, he explains that just as water is drawn up by the sun and then returns as rain, and just as living beings come from the earth and return to it, the entire flow of the material world originates in the Supreme Lord.
He compares the universe to a temporary flash of light, like sunshine.
Yes, and in verse 16, he uses this great analogy about waking up. He says when you wake up, the illusions of your dreams just vanish.
You don't have to fight the dream monsters anymore.
You just open your eyes. In the same way, true knowledge dispels the illusion of duality and all this exhausting material action.
And a major part of that illusion involves the modes of material nature, right? In verse 17, Narada specifically mentions these forces, known as the gunas.
Aravas, tamas, and sattva.
Let's break those down, because they are the invisible engines driving our behavior, aren't they?
They really are. Think of them as the three primary colors of the material world.
Okay.
Rajas is passion. It's the drive to create, to hustle, to accumulate. Tamas is ignorance. It's lethargy, destruction, and delusion.
And sattva.
Sattva's goodness. It brings clarity, balance, and peace. Every single thing we do in the material world is pushed and pulled by a mixture of these three modes. We get incredibly caught up in balancing them.
But Narada says these modes just appear and disappear in the Supreme Brahman, much like clouds or darkness appear and disappear in the sky.
Exactly. The clouds might cause a storm, they might block the sun, but the sky itself remains completely unchanged.
The Supreme remains unchanged.
Which means if you anchor yourself to the sky rather than riding the clouds, you escape the storm.
Man, that is profound. So if the Supreme is the root and the sky and the ultimate source of everything, what is the actionable plan?
Right, we need the how-to.
Exactly. How do we actually water the root in our day-to-day lives?
Well, Narada doesn't leave them hanging. In verse 18, he gives them the practical recipe. He tells them to worship that one Supreme Soul, who is the cosmic manifestation, and the Supreme Controller.
And then in verse 19, he boils down how to actually please the Lord, referred to here as Janarana, into 3 very simple things.
Right, he says the Supreme is quickly pleased by, first, showing mercy to all living beings.
Second, being completely satisfied with whatever comes your way.
And third, pacifying the senses. Now, I want you to notice what isn't on that list.
What's that?
There's nothing about having a genius intellect, performing massive rituals, or attaining immense wealth. It is entirely about how you relate to others, how you relate to your circumstances, and how you govern your own internal desires.
Being satisfied with whatever comes your way, that's like the ultimate anti-hustle mindset.
It really is. It requires trusting that the root is taking care of the tree.
Which naturally leads to this fascinating contradiction Narada brings up next in verses 20 and 21. The paradox of pride.
Yes, this is deeply psychological. Narada says the Lord never leaves the heart of pure devotees who have shed all material desires and constantly meditate on him.
But, and this is a critical boundary, he completely rejects the worship of people who are proud of their education, their wealth, their family, or their deeds.
Especially if those proud people disrespect those who are destitute but devoted.
Why is pride such a massive roadblock, though? I mean, if you worked hard for your education or your wealth, isn't it natural to feel a sense of accomplishment?
It is natural in the material sense, sure, but spiritually, it creates an illusion of self-sufficiency. This is a radical upending of our social hierarchies.
How so?
We tend to think that if someone is wealthy, highly educated, and from a good family, they are somehow blessed or favored by the universe. But Narada is explaining that if those things create pride, they act as massive walls.
Ah, I see.
When you are proud of your wealth or intellect, you subconsciously think you don't need the universe. You think you are the power source.
You think you're a drill that runs on its own batteries.
Exactly. You lose your reliance on the root. That's why the universe's highest power favors the destitute.
Which doesn't necessarily just mean financially poor, right?
Right. It means those who realize they have absolutely nothing of their own and rely entirely on him. He favors them over the elite who try to buy, study, or ritualize their way into his favor.
It requires radical humility. In verse 22, Narada points out that even the goddess of fortune herself and all the great demigods seek the Supreme Lord.
Yet he prioritizes his pure, humble devotees because he is controlled by their love, not their resumes.
Narada asks this brilliant rhetorical question. Knowing this, knowing how gracious and accessible the Lord is to the humble, how could any grateful person ever abandon him?
It's a flawless argument. The guide has provided the map. And once he does, in verse 23, Maitreya, our narrator, tells us that Narada departs for Brahmaloka.
His job is done. He leaves the Pracetas to walk the path.
And they walk it perfectly. Verse 24 tells us the Pracetas meditated on the Lord's feet, heard his glories, which are said to cleanse the world's sins, and they attained his supreme destination.
They achieved exactly what they set out to do when they walked away from their kingdoms.
Now, at this point, the text does something wonderful in verse 25. We zoom out to the framing narrative.
Oh, right, Maitreya and Vidura.
Yes. Maitreya, the sage who has been telling this entire history, turns to his listener, Vidura. Maitreya says, I have now answered your question about the conversation between Narada and the Pracetas.
We are reminded that this whole profound philosophical discourse was just a conversation between two people trying to understand the truth.
Exactly.
There is a brief mention in verses 26 and 27 by another sage, Sukadeva, connecting the lineage. He concludes the tale of the dynasty the Pracetas belong to and notes that this wisdom continues.
He mentions another king, Priyavrata.
Right, who also learned from Narada, ruled the earth, and eventually attained the supreme position. It just shows that this knowledge isn't a one-off event.
No, Narada is a constant thread weaving through generations, offering the same liberating truth.
But the emotional core of this ending really rests with Vidura, the man who just listened to Maitreya tell this story.
It does. The final verses, 28 through 30, show us the real-world impact of absorbing this knowledge. When Vidura hears this tale of the invincible Lord, he is completely overwhelmed.
His emotions are so heightened that he sheds tears.
He places the sage Maitreya's feet on his head in an act of profound submission and gratitude, and he holds Hari in his heart.
Vidura tells Maitreya, "O great yogi, you have shown me the other side of darkness, where the Lord is reached by the destitute."
He entirely gets the paradox of pride we were just talking about. He realizes that the path isn't through accumulation, but through surrender.
So Vidura bows, takes his leave, and travels to Hastinapura, the city of the elephant, to see his relatives.
But the text explicitly notes that his mind is finally at total peace.
He's going back into the intensely complex world of family and politics.
But he's bringing that peace with him because he finally understands the root. He doesn't have to stay isolated on a beach.
And that leads to the final benediction of this chapter in verse 31, which is actually the conclusion of this entire section of the text.
It promises that whoever simply hears this story of kings surrendered to Hari will attain a long life, wealth, fame, auspiciousness, opulence, and ultimately the supreme destination.
It's an incredible journey from total entanglement to absolute clarity.
The core of the truth Narada delivered is so elegant. When we recognize the supreme as the root, all those other tools we discussed,
Our intellect, our daily work, our family life,
they finally have a purpose. They aren't useless anymore, they're properly connected to the source.
We talked a lot today about watering the root instead of exhausting yourself painting the leaves with a wet Q-tip. But looking at your own life right now, you listening, in the middle of all your daily chaos, what is the root you've been neglecting?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
If you found that one core connection, which of your daily exhausting branches would finally just take care of themselves?